The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, live at Peach Doors and Windows, 2940 South, 300 West. But tomorrow, if you can't make it down today, come see us tomorrow. I'm going to be at the RV show Friday from 10 to noon at the Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. It's your opportunity to shop, compare, and buy the RV of your dreams. See you tomorrow for the biggest event of the year for RV enthusiasts. It's the RV show at Mountain America Expo Center. All right, let's welcome in our next guest. You can find him online at Ellis Hockey, as Associate Editor and Prospect Analyst for Daily Faceoff. It is Stephen Ellis. What's going on, Stephen?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. All right, Four Nations, I would say it's new to us, but it's new for everybody. You know, everything in hockey is new to people in Utah. But the Four Nations making its debut last night. Canada beating my beloved Swedes. What did you see? What did you make of the game? I was curious if this was going to feel more like an all-star game or more like the Olympics. What did you see?
It was definitely a lot more like the Olympics. I think we have seen better best-on-best international hockey, but we haven't seen this level of international hockey in almost 10 years. And, I love watching all different levels of international hockey. At the same time of watching this game last night, I was watching China play Kazakhstan at the Asian Winter Games. And you could see the bit of a slight difference in skill between, Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Victor Hedman, and these other guys. But what was really kind of important was just how big of a showcase that was, especially being in Montreal, such a big hockey market there, and Sidney Crosby having a huge game. And he's a very popular figure in Montreal because he's from Eastern Canada. He grew up a Habs fan. So even though he's been a rival for his entire career, it's really cool to be able to see that fan base really support him there. And when you get the crowd going nuts for him, and then you've got Connor McDavid on the ice too. He's just got so much talent. It was great to see. So we've seen some really boring all-star hockey the last couple of years. Actually, I shouldn't say last couple of years. Pretty much the entirety of the all-star games existed.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say last night was awesome, and I'm excited to see the next 6 games.
Yeah, Finland, USA coming up tonight. Maybe some torn Utahns because, of course, always rooting for Team USA. But Clayton Keller gets snubbed for that roster, a lot of people felt. But you have Olli Mata and Juuso Välimäki suiting up for Finland on the defensive end. What do you expect from this game? How good are these two teams compared to what we saw last night?
So when you look at Finland, this is the team that most kind of look at as the weakest team in the tournament. They've got the worst defensive depth where, with all due respect to get someone like Olli Mata, he wouldn't have the talent to make most of these other teams in this tournament, but he's going to have to play a key role because Miro Heiskanen from Dallas is gone, Rasmus Ristolainen's gone, Jani Hakanpää is gone. So 3 of their best defensemen will not participate in this tournament, and they already have the worst defensive depth of the 4 teams. Mix in that goaltending's been really rough for them. It's going to be a tough tournament. But then you look at the United States, and this is probably the strongest American hockey team ever assembled at any level. You look at they've never really been that good on the international stage. You look at the 1980 the Miracle on Ice, a massive moment for American hockey. Well, they haven't won a men's hockey tournament since then. And there's been many, many opportunities to do so. So for them, going out there and trying to win is going to be such a big thing. But they got to make sure they get that talent to work together because it is hard when you put, 18, 19, 20 all-star players on the ice in a game where just being able to gel and play different roles that they're not used to is going to be a challenge. While the Finns, a lot of these guys have they've played together dating back to when they were 14, 15, 16 years old on the international stage. But for me, I'm still thinking the Americans, they're the team to beat in this tournament. They got so much skill, and that's who I think is going to win tonight.
So a 6-game tournament, like you mentioned, is it just going to be normal points just like usual in the NHL standings to decide who plays in the championship game coming up on February 20th?
So it's a little different for this tournament. It is a much better point format, in my opinion, which follows more of what we see in international hockey tournaments, which is 3 points for a regulation win in the 60 minutes, 2 points for winning in either the overtime or shootout, and 1 point for an overtime or shootout loss. And that will make it a bit more spicy. It is something that a lot of fans have asked for in the NHL because you get teams that make the playoffs that actually didn't even have a winning record. They just happen to grab a lot of those points from all those overtime games. So I think this is one where there's just no room for for mistakes. Like one loss can be killer here, and that Canada-USA game is going to be extremely important. With right now, if Canada, they only got the 2 points there. So if it comes down to a situation where it is going to be close at the very end, Canada can look and say, well, we should have beat Sweden in regulation. But then you look at the Americans, they've got a chance to go out there and start on the right foot and go from there.
Is Canada the best roster here, or do you think the USA has a chance?
I think that the most skill is definitely on Canada, but the better constructed roster is the United States. I think with Canada, they've got all that superstar skill in Crosby, in McDavid, in McKinnon, and it just goes deep from there. But you look at the Americans, they got the best goalie in this tournament in Connor Hellebuck. They got one of the best blue lines in this tournament. And then you look at the forward group, it's not as deep or as strong as Canada, but you still have Austin Matthews, one of the best goal scorers of this generation. You got Jack Eichel. You got the Tkachuk brothers. There's so many key pieces there. So I still think Canada has the more talent, but an overall better roster. I'm going with the United States.
56 games into the season, Utah Hockey Club has 57 points. They're 24-23-9. Again, as I mentioned, Stephen, this is so new to us. And even, the most tenured hockey fans probably started watching the Arizona Coyotes last year around February when we started to hear the news that, hey, this might not only happen, it might happen next year. And even that felt like a fever dream. So where they are right now, going into what would usually be the All-Star break, this Four Nations tournament, where is the Utah Hockey Club compared to what the Arizona Coyotes have been over the last 3, 4, 5 years, where they kind of built up this reputation that they've kind of abandoned in Utah because nobody knows what it was? But if they were still in Arizona and had this record, what would people be saying about the team?
Well, that's kind of the thing. In the past couple of years, not a lot. Arizona was never a massive hockey market. But I think when you look at this group here, this is a team that is still in the playoff picture, despite having to deal with some pretty serious injuries, like Logan Cooley, Sean Durzi, Connor Ingram, and it goes deeper than that. So there's been a lot of injuries that this group has had to overcome, and yet they're 2 spots out of a wild card playoff spot. And unlike some other sports like baseball where there's like a wild card game, in this case, it's if you're in a wild card spot, you do make the playoffs. So that does make it really interesting. You look at the Western Conference, and it is still pretty wide open. Like there's been so much drama and everything surrounding the Vancouver Canucks. But right now, they are in one of those wild card spots. So it's not as tight in the Western Conference as it was in the Eastern Conference, where there's still probably 11, 12 teams that can make the playoffs. But with Utah being in the spot they're in the 4th place in that wild card race, they could very much fight their way in. They got to make sure they're fully healthy, but they've got the talent where when everything's clicking, they can make it happen. And that's the thing. This is a team that started its franchise over the summer with some big moves at the draft, some really good draft selections there. Like there is a reason to be excited about this team long term. They don't make the playoffs this year. Obviously, you want to keep building the fan base there, but I think you could still look at this as still some really positive step forwards that they're still in the running here to make the playoffs at this point in the season.
And that was a narrative coming into the year is, hey, everything goes right for this team. Maybe they're a playoff team. I think one of the things that the general manager, Bill Armstrong, has really stressed is we're not skipping steps. This is a young roster. There's going to be nights they look awesome. There's going to be nights they look like they don't belong in the NHL, and that they are not going to, expedite this rebuild just for short-term gains. So along those lines, where is this core with Mikhail Sergachev and Clayton Keller, and then some of the names you touched on, really the younger players, Logan Cooley, who's had a huge breakout, Dylan Guenther, who was, maybe the player of the week in the NHL last week with the 2 overtime winners and his return. What type of a core is that for a team that is on a rebuild, and is that, a good place to start for a team that maybe isn't winning a Stanley Cup in the next few years, but to compete for the playoffs?
Yeah, that's good. Like it is a good, solid young prospect pool. Like not a spectacular one by any means, but you're still going to have a lot of talent there with guys like Tasia Ginla, Cole Baudouin, Maverick Lamoureux. So there is some good talented pieces there. There's still work to be done, and we'll see that through the draft. But you're looking at someone like Logan Cooley, who I think is truly on his way to becoming an NHL star. We're seeing some promising signs out of Clayton Keller again this year, which is very important. I think for me, a big question mark is like, who is that long-term goalie option? When you look at who they have, they're in Ingram and Delmeka. Those are two solid goalies, but two guys that I don't really feel confident leading a team into the playoffs deep. But goaltending is an extremely fickle position. It is very hard where you look at teams that get a guy like Jordan Binnington, for example, is a great one from St. Louis. He won the Stanley Cup in 2019 with an unbelievable run. Like, he was playing in the ECHL, the third tier pro league, like a couple years before that. And then he's Canada's starting goalie at this tournament at the Four Nations. But he might be the worst of the goalies at this tournament. And that's the thing. Like, you can have a goalie that could look so good one year and fall apart the next year. It's just a weird position. But I think they still need to go establish who that long-term option is. I know they really do like Michael Arabel out of UMass in the NCAA, one of the biggest goalie prospects, one of the best goalie prospects. Some concerns about the way he plays the game down low, but I do think that if he can really hit it, Utah's got a goalie of the future there. So right now, in a good spot, still some work to be done, but I think there's a reason to be excited about the team's long-term future.
Is that the best way to get a franchise goalie? Is it have to be through the draft? Do they get moved regularly at trade deadlines? Do you hope to get somebody young who maybe, another team has an experienced veteran in front of them that they rely on? How does that position specifically establish itself?
If anyone knew the answer, they'd be a bazillionaire, I think, at this point. That's kind of the thing about goaltending, where back in like the 90s, you would see goalies play 70 games in a season, and they would ride that guy all year long. And there wasn't a concern about resting those guys. But now, as the game has gone faster and we're actually seeing a lot more goals being scored, we've seen that for goalies, it's much more difficult to play all those games. And you can look at Connor Hellebuck, who is probably the best goalie in the NHL, is a future Hall of Famer for sure. He's also done absolutely nothing in the playoffs. He has completely fallen apart way too many times for the Winnipeg Jets. You look at Jeremy Swayman, for Boston, they traded away Linus Ullmark, who won the Vezina Trophy for top goalie 2 years ago. They went all in on Jeremy Swayman, and then Jeremy Swayman's having the worst year of his career. It's so strange. So there is some ways you're looking at it. Like, the draft is definitely something you want to do. Like, I'm on the board of every team should draft at least one goalie every single year in the draft, because it is a goalie in the first round might not actually be better than a goalie in the sixth round. It's just kind of a weird position because with goalies, they don't play a ton. And you can have a guy playing in the OHL, one of the best development leagues, and it might be a top goalie prospect, but they might only play 30 games that year. And you look at the forwards, they're playing 65 to 70. So it's something where, because of goalie workloads being completely different, you are taking a lot of chances, but yeah, you're often trying to find any type of value you can get, whether it be through a trade, whether it be through free agency. But right now, goalies are so valuable that teams went from carrying two guys all year long and would only really play one guy a lot to now teams are looking to have 3 or 4 goalies ready to go on any given night.
You can read him at Daily Faceoff. You can find him on Twitter, Ellis Hockey. Steven, really quickly, last question for you. What's the narrative in the NHL over the second half of the season when we come back from the Four Nations tournament? What are going to be the big talking points?
Well, it's definitely all going to be surrounding that trade deadline. There's going to be it's a solid trade deadline, but nothing special. There's not a lot of good goalies on the market, not a ton of center depth, not a lot of big right-hand shot defensemen, which are always really important to have. But I think what you're looking here is which teams are going to be aggressive. You could still make trades here in the Four Nations face-off. Our team's going to try and get that get that early piece they need before that March 7th deadline. Maybe, but that's when the deadline passes, that's when things really start to matter.
Steven, great stuff. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for teaching me several things today. I appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.